Welcome to the Heal with Kelly podcast. I'm Kelly Noonan-Gorse, and every week I speak to the leading doctors, healers, spiritual teachers, and scientists to find out what is truly possible when it comes to healing. I also interview real people with extraordinary healing stories. My philosophy is, what's possible for one is possible for all. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful journey of remembering our divine nature and tapping into the truths that shall set us free. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Heal with Kelly podcast. Thanks for coming back, and welcome if it's your first time here. I am beyond excited for today's conversation. I know I say that pretty much every time, but like today, legitimately, it's a conversation that I need to have, that all my friends need to have, and so I literally put it out in the universe to talk about this subject, and Dr. Taz
showed up.
So I'm here with Dr. Taz Bhatia. Mm-hmm. She is the pioneer of holistic and integrative medicine, founder of CentreSpringMD, and she is innovating the future medicine and wellness. No, is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Okay. She's a pioneer in merging systems of medicine together. She's double board certified integrative medicine physician, and she's on a mission to provide the world with true holistic medicine that combines a unique integration of science, spirit, and the human experience. She came to the right podcast. Faced with personal health challenges in her 20s and a healthcare system that was dismissive, Dr. Taz turned to nutrition, homeopathy, and Eastern medical wisdom for answers. What she found was a wealth of information not yet taught in conventional medical schools. We are going to talk about her recent book, The Hormone Shift, which was named by Book Riot as one of the best menopause books, and it landed at #1 on Amazon's bestseller list, which is amazing. And so let's just dive in. Welcome.
Let's do it. Thank you. So glad to be here.
Yeah. All right. Well, the hormone shift. I love the way you frame this whole journey of being a woman in here. I think probably best to start with your personal story.
Sure.
And the hormone hell
that
led you to the work you do today.
Yeah. I mean, I always say this was a blessed accidental journey, as some of these journeys are. But, I never intended to do holistic or integrative medicine. I came out working, in the emergency room and thinking I was going to go back and do an ICU fellowship and all that other good stuff. And just got sick is probably the simplest way to say it. And probably was sick, honestly, when I look backwards, right? So at this point, I'm like 25, 26 years old, and probably the signs and symptoms were there. But with, working in the ER, flipping my schedule around, not sleeping, being stressed, all the other things, like everything just sort of crescendoed. So I had all these vague symptoms, which you could ignore. You could sweep under the rug for a period of time and kind of power through. So, there was some weight gain, there was some hair loss, there was a little bit of joint pain, and then it just exaggerated to the point that, other people started to notice and started to say things. And even people coming into the ER that were using the ER as primary care, would start to make comments or not really pay attention to what I was saying, but be looking kind of at my scalp or looking elsewhere. And so I think it was finally an intervention after probably a year of this went by, where my now husband and my mom actually were the catalyst of like, okay, something is not right, something's wrong, you're turning into a different person, you're usually super high energy and bubbly and all this other stuff, and now, you're just changing. And so that sort of spurred like, okay, yeah, they're right, I need to figure this out. And I did what all my patients do. I made the appointments, went to the doctors, and was just categorically dismissed is probably the best way to describe it. I was told I was anxious. I was told I was depressed. I was told I was stressed. Endocrinologists said I was fine. Rheumatologists said I was fine. Meanwhile, I'm not me, So I think finally the final visit was with a hair loss specialist, a world-renowned hair loss specialist, an older gentleman who walked in and took one look at me. I don't think I talked very much. He took one look at me and was like, if you don't do something, you're going to be bald in the next few years. And I think at this point, I'm like 27 maybe, or 28. So you're telling me as a 30-year-old woman, I'm going to be bald. So he's like, take these medications. And he sort of handed them off and kind of walked out the door. And I think I was just tired, and patients tell me this, right? They've had visit number 8 or visit number 10, and they've spent money and they've spent time. I was just tired. And I was like, fine, I'll take the medication. And I didn't really dig deep, which as a physician, you question a little bit, like, why didn't you do that? Because you're just tired, and you're tired of like thinking it through and trying to be your own advocate and trying to analyze data and all that other stuff. So I was like, fine, I'll just do this. But one of the side effects of the medications were that it drops your blood pressure. And I already had low blood pressure. So there was this particular incident where I started the medication, went and worked out, jumped back into my car, and I had a syncopal episode. Basically, I passed out as I was driving. And so ended up getting into a car crash and all that other stuff. So didn't hurt anybody else, but at the same time was just like, okay, this is not working, and it always takes something to kind of force you to be like, you've got to do something differently. And so then I just started digging, and this is before Google was in its like full, capacity. And so it's like hunting, exactly, like looking for stuff and, hunting and trying to find information. But I did find, there was a whole community. There was a holistic medicine community. Who knew, and they met in a regular fashion and talked about all kinds of things. And I'm like, I think I need to go there, So I signed up for one of their weekend conferences, and it was just mind blowing. It was, leaky gut and nutrition and like all this stuff that I'd never heard in all my years of training. So that started the journey of me trying to understand me, which at the end of the day wound back to like, I have PCOS, I had a thyroid issue, those hormone shifts or hormone imbalances were in turn triggering an inflammatory response. So I was presenting sort of autoimmune-ish. They were also triggering a metabolic issue. So that's why I was gaining weight, rapidly. And so once I figured out that the root of all of that was a bad gut, I'm gluten intolerant, I was low iron, and I just started replacing and replenishing and rebuilding. And it takes time. These are not quick fixes, right? So it took probably a year or two of, once I'm learning to start to see benefits and results. But over 2 years, I was back to me, And meanwhile, everyone's asking like, wait, what did you do? Like, what happened? And for me personally, what happened was, once you learn a little bit, you want to learn a lot, and then you want to learn a lot more. So then I'm like, oh, I think I want to learn more about Chinese medicine because those guys fixed me. So I went and, did a certification in acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine. And then I'd kind of grown up loosely with sort of Ayurveda in the background, but had dismissed it all, right? Because we're rebellious. We don't pay attention to what our moms tell us. So I kind of thought all of it was stupid, but, went back to that and started to really understand and research that a little bit. And then did a nutrition certification and finally did the fellowship with Andy Weil out in Arizona and graduated from that. So my husband's watching this now. We're married and he's watching this whole thing and he's like, I think you need to do something with this. He's like, I don't know. It just feels like people are always stopping you. They're always asking you questions. He goes, I think there's something here. And he was like, you don't need to worry about anything. He goes, don't worry about overhead or running a business or any of that type of stuff. Just 2 rooms in the back of my dental office, because he was coming out of dental school, and he was like, 2 rooms, you do one for acupuncture, do one for consults, come when you want, leave when you want, use my front desk. And he goes, you don't have to give up the ER, and you can run a lighter schedule, because we were planning a family as well. And so I was like, I can do that. That sounds
Dream
easy.
Husband, by the way.
He's a sweet. Yeah. I mean, I will always credit him with kind of kicking me to make all this happen. But anyhow, so we thought that's what was going to happen. But what actually happened was it blew up, and it went from, like, I'm going to be there 2 days a week and leave at 2 p.m. and go pick up the kids and be home in time and do all that stuff and do like 6 or 7 ER shifts a month to keep those skills going, to now like I'm coming home at 9 and 10 o'clock at night because people are sitting in this tiny, I can't even describe the space to you. It's now our admin space. We use it for that. But in this tiny space, like on the floor, waiting for me to come out, driving from all over, like it just crescendoed into something I don't even think I fully understood, to be honest. So I came into this, it's funny because I see all these health entrepreneurs now, right? So I came into this without a business plan, without saying I'm an entrepreneur, without any kind of game plan for growth. I really thought this was a hobby. I swear to this day, this was a hobby. This was supposed to be like a fun consult thing. So, as you start to see patients and they tell you their stories and you understand the effort they go through to get to you, you start to understand that you have a responsibility, and you can't, it's almost like when you sign up for something, you can't walk away from that responsibility. And so patient after patient would come in with whatever their ailments were, would tell me their stories. I would present them with options and plans, they got better, but some of them would leave and feel conflicted. And that confliction was, well, you're telling me to do this, but my doctor, my primary care doctor, this doctor, that doctor, who I've had relationships with for X number of years, is saying this is a bunch of crap. And remember, this is now over 20, 25 years ago. Right. So where this whole field of medicine was just kind of poo-pooed and dismissed and stuff like that. And so I think it took a couple of patient stories, and we can talk about those if you want to, that were heartbreaking and dramatic. And I realized that I can't do medicine light, is what I called it. Like, if I'm going to do this, it has to be all in. And so, I opened in the back of that dental office in 2009, coming back in after delivering my son. And by 2011, late 2010, 2011, we knew this wasn't working anymore. And there's a lot of, hilarious stories in there. My husband walking in and seeing my patients in his dental chairs, like moving acupuncture needles away from his dental equipment, like looking at like the chaos everywhere and being like, we are done. Like, this is done. This deal is over, So, we laugh about all of that now. But that year, right around 2011, 2012 is when I'm like, it's got to be more. We have to be able to take care of the whole patient. This whole, like, I'm just going to do this consult version of medicine's not working. It's not working for the patient. And that's sort of where I committed to really making this my mission. And so everything's followed since then.
Amazing.
It's like the quickest version I can get out.
No, it's great. That's amazing. And it is such a mission. So I guess let's lay the foundation about the 5 hormone shifts. I love that you call them shifts.
Yes.
And I think it's so great too, because you talk about how important it is to learn about this. Yeah. As I'm kind of in the superstar.
Yeah.
Shift. Yeah. I'm 45.
And superwoman. You're a superwoman.
Oh, I'm a superwoman.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I'm a superstar. I like that. But superwoman.
You can be a superstar still.
Thank you. But I'm in like full denial that there are any symptoms going on. I've attributed them to every other thing, but we'll get into my story next. I think it's so important that even though hormone talk is mostly around women like entering menopause and that big shift and the hot flashes and all those fun symptoms that come along with it, but we really need to, especially in light of like all the information that we've found out about, birth control and what it does to our hormones, like we need to be educating young women and mothers and how to navigate this together. Because talk to us a little bit about the foundation that we're laying with hormones at a young age.
Yeah, definitely. The beauty of practicing the way I do, it's a family practice. We see all ages, everyone's issues. We get to look at data, is that you start to see the patterns. And one of the things that has struck me is that we're having these conversations way too late. This, like, even for me, like the symptoms were probably there in my teens and 20s, but I didn't know, and they're ignored and they're not, really called out. So my mission with writing this book was very much, I wanted it to be a handbook for all women, whether you were 12 or 13 years old or whether you were 70, so that you could understand how our journey as women is so interconnected. And it builds upon the previous foundation you laid. So, and this is a Chinese medicine concept. I'm not some brilliant scientist who came up with this, right? Straight from Chinese medicine, they talked about qi, right? How much energy you're gifted at birth. And you can replenish that energy and you can build it or you can waste it, But we are never taught to think that way, that like we have a certain amount of energy that's gifted, a certain amount of energy that we have to earn or we have to build, right? And if we're always building, we move from shift to shift or decade to decade with ease and with grace and with a lot of confidence and not feeling like, we're losing something or we're aging or, all this other stuff. So, one of the things I noticed, because we have this family unit, is that the patterns of the mother, whether the mother was coming in for hot flashes, night sweats, fatigue, weight gain, whatever, and then would bring her daughter in. When we looked at hormone data, it was similar. It wasn't very different. So women and their children were replicating the same hormone patterns. However, they were not as dramatic maybe in your teens or 20s as they are maybe in your 40s or 50s, but the foundation is there. So one of the things I really wanted to do was to be like, there is a strategy around managing hormones, and that strategy should begin in your teens, if not even before, with a healthy gut and a healthy liver and some of these very important concepts. And if we can teach our young girls how to do this. Then they hit, their 20s with knowing how to care for themselves and not experiencing those dramatic shifts. They hit their 30s without a big IVF or infertility journey. They hit their 40s without some massive dramatic perimenopause journey, and then their 50s with a gentle menopause, right? So these 5 shifts I've literally divided that way, right? So the first one, I call them the rock stars. I tried to have fun with this, so bear with me. I call them the rock stars because I'm watching these kids and they're like acting like rock stars, right? They're like top of the world one moment, they're like in their beds the next, they're sobbing, they're happy, they're all over the place, right? But that does go with exactly what their hormones are doing. Their hormones are all over the place. So how do you have hormone stability when your hormones are all over the place? Well, the conventional medicine answer is historically the birth control pill, or, the implanted birth control that some girls go on and things like that. But my answer back is like, actually, if you can work on a healthy gut, get your nutrition where it needs to be, replenish the body with key nutrients that are missing throughout your entire life, depending on your genetics and your pattern, then you don't have to have these highs and lows even in your teen years, So it's starting with like, okay, these rock stars who think they're invincible, who think nothing's going to get to them, who are all over the place. You never know what you're going to wake up to. There are things that they can do. They're actionable. So that's the first one. The second one, and this is where I think maybe I started to have more noticeable symptoms just personally. I call them the hustlers, right? Because, you are working, you're going to school, you're doing 20 things at one time, you're dating like 12 guys maybe, and then you're like coming home, whatever it is you're doing, right? There's usually a lot going on. And same thing, like the previous phase, you think you're kind of invincible, but this is now where you can't really ignore stuff. Usually cortisol levels are starting to get really high, progesterone's dropping. Those symptoms are showing up in different ways. They're either showing up as anxiety, they're showing up as acne, they're showing up as sort of the earliest signs of hair loss, so many irregular periods, so many different things are starting to happen. And then from that phase where women often don't take care of themselves or aren't paying attention to themselves, then we move into what we call the superstar phase, which is more about building, and it's about building family, and you're sort of settling into maybe your first really serious job, and maybe you're newly married or not, or you have a partner, but you're thinking about family. Usually you're in some phase of family development. And for those women, that journey can be frustrating, right? All of a sudden, for the first time, they're being told, that, they can't get pregnant, or, they have severe anxiety that has to be medicated. So all these shifts are now exaggerating. So the high cortisol of your 20s is now even higher in your 30s. Progesterone levels continue to drop. Now maybe your thyroid is involved as well. So you can see how it's just sort of building, it kind of builds upon each other. And then those very same women go into perimenopause, which is the superwoman phase, which you were referring to yourself. And now we're not only seeing those hormones shifting, but we're also seeing the first signs of estrogen coming down. And as estrogen starts to come down, that's the weight gain, that's some of the moodiness, the depression, the waking up a lot in the middle of the night. And then moving forward, going into the last phase, which is the commander phase, which is where women are crossing into menopause or are postmenopausal. This is where you have hormone depletion. So now estrogen's bottoming out, progesterone's bottoming out, your thyroid and blood sugar and insulin are all responding to that. Cortisol usually is going up because it doesn't have the other hormones to correct, those particular patterns. So those women historically, have been kind of isolated, like they're stressed, they're depressed, they cry at the drop of a hat, and society kind of like puts them, has a stereotype we talk about in the book of sort of just the menopausal woman who's like raging all the time, or, losing it, or, not fun to be around, or things like that. But again, there's chemistry behind that. So when we think through these shifts, these 5 shifts, like, right, rock stars, hustlers, superstars, superwomen, and then the commanders, you can tell how the patterns have built up over time. And if you feed the body and nourish the body in a way, none of those shifts are dramatic. You can actually very gently move from shift to shift and give your body kind of what it needs so that you're still you, which is the point of this whole journey, probably just a better version of you at every single phase or stage, So that's sort of what I was seeing in the exam room, and what I really wanted to do by writing the book was, I didn't want it to be just another menopause book, honestly. I wanted it to be a little bit deeper, and us really thinking about just our journey as women.
The whole journey. It's so good. It's so funny that the superstars came before superwomen, because I'm in full denial. Yeah. I'm in, before this interview, and I know this has happened to you before, but I had some conversations with my girlfriends, and they're like, when are you going to talk about hormones? Like, we're in it, right? We're mid-40s. And a lot of them have had kids a lot younger. I have a 5-year-old, so I was a little late to the game, and I want to have another kid. So I'm in denial, like that there's any shift happening, right? Because I'm like holding on to every egg popping out that can keep coming. So, but it was just like. Anyways, I guess I don't know where I was going with that, except for my friends are fully dialoguing about it, and that's how in denial I am, because I'm just like I'm not having a conversation. But then when I'm reading through your book and looking at symptoms, I'm like, oh god, dang it, there's some things happening. Anyways, so I guess I'm gonna just start with one of the funniest questions on my threads this morning.
Okay.
Was
well, I mean, I think to your one thing I do want to say as you lay that out, I think the shame and why did you do that? Like, why are you in denial? I think it's because there's some sort of cultural, dialogue around if you're having a hormone shift in your 40s or 50s, you're getting old, And I think it's sort of this narrative that everyone starts to become super fearful of, and it doesn't need to really be that way. We just came from a meeting where we were talking about age is completely irrelevant now. Now, if you're trying to have children, yes, the technology and the science maybe hasn't caught up with like how do we preserve ovarian function well into your 50s and 60s, right? But people are working on it, right?
Good.
There's, PRP for your ovaries and all kinds of things happening. But, we're just not there yet. But other than that one factor, there shouldn't really be shame around this. There should just be like, okay, something's changing and shifting. What do I need to do? And it needs to be very pragmatic and kind of very linear. And I think we all, myself included, before, like we all just like spin. We're like, oh my God, this is not happening. This can't be happening. I'm going to pretend like it's not happening. I'm not going to do anything about it. And if I go to the doctor and have a conversation about it, then I'm going to have to admit that it's actually happening, So I think we need to really, push back on like, let's just jump into it and realize there's so many options nowadays and so many different things you can do that you just need to pick one and run with it,
Yeah. I mean, because I am, exposed to so many different modalities and healers and cool people, like, I see like this really cool osteopath that muscle tests and is like a genius. But I haven't done like blood labs or checked my hormones. Like I need to do that East-West combination, especially now when I am, and I think it's less shame. It's just like I've been through a really intense emotional 2 years because of some family stuff. And so I've kind of just chalked every symptom up to emotional stress, and because I'm still having pretty regular periods, like really regular, but they're shifting a little bit in just kind of, I guess, magnitude. And I still want another child, so I've just been like, okay, as long as the period's regular and there's no like symptoms directly related to the cycle, I feel okay. But like in the last few months, in the last year, I've had these like migraines, and in the last 2 months, which I've had tension headaches before, but this last year I've had like 3 to 5 day migraines, and the last 2 were like clearly like on my cycle on the full moon, and I'm like, okay, there's got to be some like hormonal connection here.
Yeah, definitely, and there definitely is a hormone pattern to migraines for sure.
Yeah. So I guess now that I was talking about my friend. They have these like really specific questions, which we'll get into. But the first one was just like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
And then she goes, and sub question, "What the fuck with sleep?"
Oh.
And then sub question B, "What the fuck in weight gain?"
Oh my
gosh. It's just really funny.
I love it. It does feel like your world's turning upside down a little bit. I feel like women feel like they go from being like, I'm on and I feel great and I'm, superwoman or whatever, to being like, I can barely, get through the day type thing. it's all hormones. It's very much like we can talk about the first hormone shift, like as progesterone drops, which is usually what women entering their 40s experience, most dramatically, at least initially, then you can't sleep. As progesterone drops, it's that 2 to 4 a.m. wake up. Sometimes there's hot flashes and night sweats associated with that. But then as that progesterone continues to drop, that cortisol level is kind of like unchecked and it just gets higher and higher. So that's now between the two. It's the anxiety, it's the blood sugar instability, it's the brain fog, gaining weight, a lot of those things. So that's usually what's happening first. Then you've got estrogen playing into it as well. So, all her questions and her statement is because now you have to change. And I think that's the other thing I hear over and over again is like, I'm eating the same, I'm exercising the same, I haven't done anything differently, so why are all these things happening, whether it's the scale or your hair or your skin or, whatever it is. And my answer back is always, it's because your hormones have probably changed or shifted. So we have to be able to identify which one it is so that we can give you a customized, sort of more personalized plan, And that's the other important thing too, is that, with these 5 shifts, it's nice to know what your normal is because everyone has their own normal, So if you're a woman in your 20s, it's good to check once a year or so and just know where you are because that's where you feel good. And so by the time you get to 30 or 40, then you kind of have a reference of like, I see what just happened here, because the conventional ranges, are really meant for disease patterns. They're not really meant to optimize you necessarily, right? They're meant to more identify like, okay, there's a disease pattern happening here, but not really asking questions like, well, what makes you feel good? What makes you sleep? Not really targeting all of that.
Which is why women especially can go to a doctor and their labs land in the normal range, in the green, but they're
miserable.
It's not normal for them.
Right.
And there's other things attached to that.
Yeah, definitely.
So like things like progesterone or like when these things drop, can we and we can talk about your 30-day reset, but like how do we get ahead of it and keep those levels up? I guess at every stage for every hormone, there's lifestyle things we can do. Diet? Is it lifestyle diet? Is it hormone replacement therapy?
It's a little bit of all of it depending on where you enter the conversation. If you're entering early and you're just seeing, a few symptoms here and there, they're not really drastically impacting your quality of life. I feel like diet and lifestyle and even different herbs and supplements and nutrients really make a big difference. We could add acupuncture to that. That whole toolbox does work. It stops working when people enter kind of at later stages or they're progressing and that chemistry is not getting corrected, right? So if you're up all night hot flashing, or you've gained a significant amount of weight, then, these are things that might need, this is why I love the East-West toolbox and why I'm so passionate about kind of what we do in practice, because you kind of just move through the toolbox. First you have to understand where to enter it, and then you kind of have to move through it, so depending on your quality of life, those decisions have to be made. You may need hormone replacement therapy. If you're a woman in your early 40s, you may not need estrogen. You may just need a little bit of progesterone, right? And it may just be towards that latter half of your cycle when you're starting to get migraines. It may just be like the last 7 days 21 through 28. But if you're a woman like further into your 50s and you're like sweating all night and, not getting any sleep, getting foggy, you're cognitively having, issues too, then you might need some estrogen and progesterone replaced, both of them. And the flip side of that is that there are many women who understand the dietary component to this, because we know that to manage the hormones, we need consistent protein, we need the right amount of dietary fiber for sure, but we need fat. So for women that have been fasting for a long period of time, or women that from the 80s that were doing the low fat thing for a very long period of time, right? Those women, or even women that are doing keto for too long, those women have hormone shifts that can be handled by modification of their diet, so they really need to look more deeply at their diet. Questions to ask yourself as you're looking through your diet, and we talk about this in the book, like, are you getting the right protein in the right intervals? Are you getting the right amount of fiber to help you metabolize your hormones effectively? Where is your nutrient load? Do you have variety, in terms of your diet to make sure you're getting different nutrients in, different gut bacteria in, because every food has different properties, and many people I meet have the same breakfast, the same lunch, the same dinner, over and over again. So, and then things like, coffee and sugar, caffeine, I should say, not coffee necessarily, but caffeine, sugar, alcohol, they worsen hormone shifts for sure. And we know that, so those are things to start to take a harder look at. And sometimes people that just do that work, it's fine. Like their hormones are handled and they're fine. Others start to add things. We find that they're low in B vitamins, low in magnesium. They may need an herb to boost progesterone because we're not quite ready for hormone replacement yet. So doing something like chasteberry, right? Or, adding in something to block the androgens, which this was a big issue for me. So adding in like a saw palmetto or something like that, or adding herbs in to support the liver. That's the next place we go, So again, I always say, while we do the 30-day reset to really help people kind of get back into balance, I always want people kind of being super intuitive and observing themselves during that plan. Where did you respond the most? Did you respond the most right in the beginning, as soon as we took out a lot of the inflammatory foods and things like that? Or did you respond more as we started to add some of these, nutrients and supplements and herbs back in? Or was it acupuncture, that kind of got you over the hump there? So it's very patient dependent. But by writing the book, we tried to bring the information so that you can have this journey, with yourself, because I know it's hard to find providers and a provider team that's sort of willing to look at the whole picture, rather than like just say, okay, like hormones for everyone or no hormones for anyone. I feel like we've got these camps going on right now, and the truth is probably more in the middle,
Totally. Always is.
Yep.
So blood, urine, so people need to test their hormones and then work with, you can only work with a limited amount of people.
Right.
So do you have what kind of specialist should a person go to be in line with kind of your philosophy?
Definitely. Well, first of all, in the book, there's a whole lab guide, and that guide can be taken to LabCorp or Quest, just a conventional, testing facility. And again, same thing, you can interpret this on your own, because I have the ranges there of what we've seen in practice over the last 15 years. We've seen probably over 50,000 patients at this point. So what we've seen, kind of where most women, again, everyone's an individual, where most women feel good and optimal, and the things to look out for and what you can flag. So you could do that on your own. You don't even need a provider at that point. And if you don't want to do a LabCorp Quest, which is blood, you can do, an at-home saliva or urine test and also get that information. So there are many different ways to get the information nowadays. Aside from that, like if you're ready to have a partner, then ideally you want to look for somebody who's either done integrative medicine or functional medicine or a holistic medicine, just because we're going to have this expanded toolbox mindset overall. There are amazing GYNs out there that do hormone replacement therapy, but I find that they're often limited to hormone replacement therapy, right? So you just have to be, and then there's the endocrinology community as well, but they're similar in that I feel like their channel is a little bit smaller. They have their list of things, because again, no fault to anybody out there. It's just medicine's not set up to think that way. It's set up to think in a specialty linear way, not with the interconnectedness of everything. So I feel like most women are best served by having at least somebody on their team with that holistic perspective, because that way they can look at the whole picture and all the different options when it comes to, what they need to be doing first, what comes second, what comes third, and if they make that decision about hormone replacement therapy, what is the right hormone form, to use, because even that does need to ideally be individualized. We can say hormones for all, but there are people with genetics that don't metabolize hormones very well, so we have to be careful, with them. And then there are people that even the smallest amount of hormone sends them over the edge. I've had those patients too. And then others for whom standard doses simply don't work. They need more. So it's really trying to find somebody who's willing to take on that whole picture. But some of this you can start on your own, for sure.
Cool. Yeah, my friends were asking about what natural remedies and supplements can help us through the superwoman phase.
Yeah.
But I guess it's individual based on your lab?
Well, the way we did, it's based on, here's what you want from your labs, and even from the book. And in the book, we have like an assessment that you can take. You want to identify your dominant hormone pattern. We each have one. The main pattern that's driving all the others, right? So for me, it's androgens, right? A tendency towards estrogen and androgen dominance, meaning my body will store it. It'll hold on to it, it'll store it, and then it'll convert it into something called androgens, which give us acne and oily skin and oily hair. And that's a pattern. If you look at, the women in our family, my 70-year-old mother has it too, right? Even though she's postmenopausal, my 16-year-old daughter has it as well, So the first thing to do is to identify your main pattern. Then you start going for natural remedies and things like that are tailored to that pattern. Cool. So we know that like DIM, for example, and saw palmetto help estrogen and androgen dominance, right? Whereas, Dong Quai helps somebody who's low estrogen, right? So it's like trying to help you identify where you really need to put your energy and time. And the book does that, it does try to help people do that. And then in practice, we can do that in a more sort of curated way because we're meeting with somebody one-on-one, we're looking at data, we're able to identify it. And then we're able to, say like, these are your 3 non-negotiables. These are the 3 things we need you to take every day,
Cool. And for sleep, is there something that's non-addictive that doesn't screw up your own melatonin production, or is that kind of fall in that same family that it's going to be unique to you based on your dominance?
I mean, you always want to know what's going on hormonally because that's going to impact sleep. But yes, I think there's some standard across the board recommendations. Some you've probably heard. Magnesium, I think everyone benefits from in terms of trying to correct sleep. It really does help. First of all, it supports the hormones. It supports progesterone and cortisol and all of these guys. But I would take at least about 100 to 200 milligrams nightly if you're having issues with sleep. From there, I've often said it's okay to do melatonin, but just do under 3 milligrams. It's when you're doing the 10 and the 12 that you can shut down your own, and it can become a little bit problematic. And then there are a lot of different herbs that help with sleep. So magnolia bark is one that we like a lot. Holy basil is another one. So there's some things that you can reach for, when it comes to sleep there. And I think newer in the field are more of using like color therapy and light therapy and sound therapy and vibrational therapy to help you sleep. So there's everything from little patches that have light frequency in it to sound meditations, that's particular vibrations that help you to fall asleep too. And of course, then there's the whole, pharmaceutical world as well. So, with sleep, there are a lot of options. Now, for women, when they lose progesterone and estrogen, those are the most common reasons that they can't sleep. So if they've tried a few of these different things that we've mentioned, and, you still, a few weeks have gone by and you still can't sleep through the night, then you need to be having that conversation around hormones and checking yours and trying to see what you can do about it.
Okay, cool. Hormone replacement therapy.
Yes.
And the cardiovascular implications of perimenopause and menopause.
Yep.
Can HRT benefit with protective qualities? Is there an ideal time to start for
These are
maximum
all
benefits?
such amazing questions. So HRT is having a moment right now, hormone replacement therapy. Kind of the dialogue out there is, I feel like it's hormones for everybody right now. And what we want to, and that's a huge step forward from the World Health Initiative study that said no hormones for anybody, right? So we've sort of like in 20 years gone in 2 different directions. Again, there's a sweet spot for hormones. And in that sweet spot where you are bringing your hormone levels up to a certain point and metabolizing those hormones well, meaning you're not storing them, you're not holding on to them, you're not burdening the liver with too much, all of those ideas, they're not triggering inflammation. Hormones are protective for heart health, for brain health, for bone health, for skin, for hair, for mood, for cognition, for so many different things. But when there's too much hormone on board, it actually can be inflammatory and it can work against the heart. Mm-hmm. And when there's too little on board, it can also be an issue for the heart. So it's again like trying to help people identify, when you have sort of a table with hormone replacement therapy options, which ones are going to work and which ones are going to get our levels to where they need to be without going in either direction, so I don't like heavy-handed hormone replacement. I don't like those mega doses of hormones that you go in and get and you come right back out. I don't think that's effective. And in my practice experience, what I've learned is that very gentle bioidentical hormone replacement is effective for young women and women going up to about maybe 45, 46. That works. That's enough. We can tweak the doses. You can be on like 10 milligrams versus 100 milligrams of progesterone. You can be on, half a milligram or 0.25 milligrams of a bioidentical estrogen that resembles the estrogen that we make. But once you start crossing, and again, this is very different, and I'm probably generalizing a bit too much, but once you cross 45, 46, 47, sometimes those bioidenticals don't seem to absorb well enough to really get the levels where we need to get them. So oftentimes I find myself switching patients to maybe a patch that's delivering hormones continuously, or a pill, as long as it's not an estrogen pill, or vaginal troches or things like that, where the absorption can be better to get those levels where they need to go. So yes to hormone replacement therapy, but yes to finding the right level and the right type for you and your body chemistry. And I think that's the part that I'm not hearing in this like rah-rah hormone conversation, right? That's the part that's getting missed.
Yeah, it's so funny. I had a hormone doctor a long time ago, maybe 12, 15 years ago, put me on pregnenolone.
Yeah.
And I remember it made me so sharp and so energized, but it did make my skin break out a little bit, oily. Yeah. So I'm like, oh, that's so interesting. So maybe I was on too much, but
you might have been on too much, and you might be androgenic like me, where progesterone and pregnenolone can convert into those androgens that give us the breakouts and the oily skin and all this stuff.
So interesting. Yeah. So for someone like me, 45, still has a regular period, may start to have some perimenopausal symptoms, how do obviously I need to get my hormones tested, but how do I prolong fertility and stay vital and optimal? And
yeah, I love that. So prolonging fertility is about, we use Chinese medicine words, replenishing your qi.
Okay.
And qi is all about, where's your nutrient load? Where's your oxidative stress? Do you have enough antioxidants in your body, in your system? So every cell is brimming with energy, right? And vitality, versus being under stress and having to fight. Where is inflammation, and what do we need to do about that? So preserving fertility. Fertility is a sign of good energy, right? So preserving fertility is a lot about nutrient replacement, gut health, gut rehab work, reduction of inflammation, and really improving your antioxidant load so you can release good quality eggs. That's what preserving fertility is about. Now, there's a literature, there's all this literature in older systems of medicine around herbs that support fertility. So there's something called shethvari, which is an herb in Ayurveda that's supposed to improve fertility. But when you look and dig into it, it's actually from asparagus, a particular type of asparagus, and that particular type of asparagus increases or releases glutathione. And glutathione is an antioxidant that actually helps egg quality. So it totally makes sense now that we know the science behind it. So there are some things you can take to help fertility as well. But I think day to day, moment to moment, being vigilant about your sleep and your stress and your food quality and your nutrient intake, to me, that's a big part of fertility right there.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So another friend was asking about, there's a lot of products on the market that claim by changing gut health, you can improve your hormones. What?
So they're not wrong. Okay. There is a Gut-Hormone Connection. I write about it in the Hormone Shift. It's actually straight from the older systems of medicine. The science behind that connection is around the microbiome. We know that the microbiome shifts and changes with hormone shifts and vice versa. One of the big shifts that we see, kind of again to generalize, is a shift towards candida, or an overgrowth of yeast, which then makes somebody like me more androgenic. So then I produce more androgens, that's more acne, more hair loss. when we think about it that way, we know these claims are partially right, not knowing what the products are. So if there is something that minimizes yeast in the gut, it is going to indirectly help the hormones, right? There's also something called the estrobolome, which is the microbiome of your gut that determines what your body's going to do with estrogen. So yes, there is some validity to that. And then the third part of this actually is there's this whole concept around fat malabsorption, where the pancreas kind of gets boggy and sluggish, doesn't produce the enzymes we need to break foods down. So we start to spill fat or lose fat, which then results in hormone depletion. So these three kind of gut ideas are tied directly to hormones. So if a product is latching onto one of those and it can show it's effective, then absolutely yes, it's probably doing something. But we don't want to say, we want to be specific when we're making those claims, right? We don't want to just randomly say, okay, this is a gut product, so it's going to help your hormones. But it kind of has to match one of those patterns.
Yeah, got it. So this might be controversial and you could choose not to talk about it, but my friend specifically asked about it. So
Okay.
What are your thoughts on this huge Ozempic GLP-1 craze? Because obviously there's a whole cast of women that are gaining weight and don't know what to do about it, so they're just taking the quick fix. But I've seen devastating, people like dying and stuff. So
GLP-1. So we prescribe them in practice, but here's who we think is the right candidate.
Perfect.
The right candidate is somebody that has a BMI over about 30 or so, has a high leptin level. Leptin is a hormone that regulates our hunger and how full we are. We actually test that hormone too in practice. But a leptin of over about 20, 25 or so, those people are truly struggling. Like if you think of that profile, like they have a high BMI, they have the super high leptin level. Many of those that patient profile, they actually had PCOS all the way through undiagnosed. So they already have this issue with high blood sugar and high insulin. So when you're kind of there, insulin resistance is really hard. It's hard to move that needle. It's hard to turn that around. People get really frustrated. So when we're prescribing a GLP-1 like Ozempic or Moderna or any of these medications to them, here's the strategy. Let's get a healthy gut first. Let's reduce the inflammation in your body that's not associated with weight. So let's really learn what healthy eating looks like, what interval eating looks like. Let's replace the nutrients that you're missing as well. And then let's just start to move the body. And once we can kind of accomplish these couple of things, right, then you're ready to take a GLP-1, but with support. And that support is using digestive enzymes, starting something called glutamine that rebuilds the gut lining, because we know the GLP-1s hit the gut. But when we start a GLP-1, it's for a limited amount of time. I really don't like the whole you're on this forever, you're married to this medication. I don't think that's ever good with anything, honestly.
Great for the pharmaceutical sales
Great
rep.
for the industry, but not so great for the patient. So the question is, like, we're titrating people up and then we're titrating them back down, because we hope that with all the front work we did and what they've learned in that process, that as they come off of it, then, and we take them off in a very gentle way. They may just do it once a month. They may do it once every 2 months. You know what I mean? But what we hope is that we've gotten their metabolic set point to a different place so that now they can take over. Mm-hmm. So that's that patient profile. But meanwhile, there is everybody else, right? Who has 5 pounds to lose or has 10 pounds to lose, or maybe even has 15 pounds to lose. I am not a fan of using it in those scenarios. I would rather we work hard on the microbiome. I'd rather we work hard on hormone balancing, really try to understand how we need to change and adapt what we're doing. But none of those things are a quick fix. So people really want that quick fix. And that's where I bet you're seeing the devastating consequences, because those patients should not be on this medication. Mm-hmm. There is a compounded version of the medication, which is at a quarter of the dose. But I've even seen side effects from that, Mm-hmm. And so I think we have to be careful when we're making these decisions. And I know how tempting it is, because everyone around you is getting skinny and you're trying to do it this other way. But at the end of the day, what is the long-term? I think we need to think short-term, long-term. Are you wanting a short-term gain, or do you want a long-term gain? Mm-hmm. And one of the things we understand about metabolism, period, is no matter which option you choose. I had a patient the other day that chose phentermine. She got prescribed phentermine, which is the old, it's a new version of fen-phen.
Oh my gosh.
But but like without the devastating side effects. But we were using it a lot like 15 years ago on patients trying to lose weight. But it's an appetite suppressant, right? Stimulant, appetite suppressant, almost like a Vyvanse or ADHD type medication. So she lost a bunch of weight on it, lost 25 pounds. It got her out of that insulin resistant stuck point. But now what? You know, because one of the things we understand about metabolic adaptation is that, you know, as you calorie restrict, you just continue to drop your metabolic set point lower and lower. So yes, you lose weight in the short run, but what about the long run? And that's why people are dealing with the bounce back. So it's almost like the slower you go, the better, because you teach the body, like, this is the way, you know, to be. And then there's not this dramatic rebound on the other end of it. So, you know.
Yeah. And the body is so intelligent. It's like you're giving it the framework to remember its natural function.
Yeah.
But if you swing too big, it's just confusing, and then it's going to swing just out of survival of the evolution of species,
right?
It's going to overcompensate. So if you, it's just the way you practice is so the future of
I hope
health. It's like it has to be, you know. It's like,
that's my
use the
mission,
the best that Western medicine has to offer, and science and.
Yeah, this is not a rejection.
You know?
That's the thing. It's like not a rejection. We're not rejecting anything. We're not rejecting Western medicine. We're just saying, can we think about this a little bit more? Can we have more personalization to this? And can we try these other things first? Because they do work. But I think if we're going to stay in this Western mentality of, I have this, therefore I take this. I have this, therefore I take this. Then whether you're healthy or sick, you're going to end up on 15 medications and, you know, constantly trying to like manage all these different things. So
yeah, I just see it so clearly as like the opportunity we do get stuck, and we are bombarded with a bunch of like invisible toxins in our food and our air and our water and emotional stress that we just haven't evolved to keep up with the inundation of information and negativity and you know, news and social media. So like we need to utilize all the tools, Western and Eastern, but in a way that supports our body in getting back to its own intelligent function.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for doing that work.
Yeah.
I have more questions, but
okay,
we're wrapping up.
Right.
But once you hit perimenopause and like my friend, you know, or maybe menopause, but she said, what's the right cadence to go to a gynecologist to get a pap smear and check out all the other stuff? Because she says that the experience has been dismissive and unhelpful and confusing because her period's irregular or not existent.
So I believe the guideline is to continue to get regular paps, assuming you have all your organs, right? To get regular paps at least yearly, going until about 60, 65 or so.
Okay.
So you should still be getting regular paps, you know, for sure. Okay. I feel like we need to change the guidelines around women's health, honestly. I feel like women need to continue to get paps. You know, we can cut off because at some point there is vaginal atrophy. But if a woman in her 60s, I should qualify that actually, if a woman in her 60s is on hormones, then she should still be getting paps, period. You know, so if you're on hormones, you still need to be getting paps. But the other thing that I feel like we need to make mandatory with women's health, and we do this in practice, is doing a pelvic ultrasound. You know, doing that, and you can do it through the abdomen as well. You don't have to do it through the vaginal area, but doing that at least every 3 years, because I feel like we're missing, for women that still have their uterus and their ovaries and stuff like that, we're missing those patterns of endometrial buildup, assuming a woman is menopausal or assuming a woman is perimenopausal. But she does have buildup still if she's estrogen dominant or somebody who has the genetics of storing stuff. So I feel like that should just be at least every 3 years, you know. And then the other one that I see get missed all the time is thyroid, you know, an assessment of the thyroid and getting thyroid ultrasounds, because I feel like that's way more prevalent than we realize, for sure.
Oh my gosh, we could have a whole episode just on thyroid. We're gonna have to do like a 3-part series.
Back.
You do, yes. You do. Anyhow, so I just, because I'm so fascinated with emotions.
Yeah.
And,
I love this.
Chinese medicine and how organ systems process different emotions and what it all means, and then like, you know, just like even the breast cancer, nurturing connection, like conditions, there always is an emotional or perhaps chi meridian connection. So can you talk a little bit about that before we part ways?
I love this topic, but I always feel like I'm not sure I can hold people's attention to this topic, because once I use the word meridian, they're like, what are you talking about? But one of the things I love about Chinese medicine is its ability to merge the mental, physical, and emotional, and even the spiritual bodies together. Like, I'm pretty passionate about at least us understanding that we have 5 different bodies. There are probably more, right? But from my understanding right now, we have like an energetic, a physical, a spiritual, emotional, a mental body. And a lot of time people come to me and we fix the chemistry, we fix the physical stuff, but stuff is still there, and that's where it's like that aha moment. I'm like, this is deeper, I'm not an energy healer, but maybe that's what we need, or this is trauma or things like that. So this is much deeper. But Chinese medicine tied every meridian or channel of energy in our body to a physical function, to an emotional vibration, and then even to sort of like a spiritual challenge that you were having of sorts. So when it comes to hormones, one of the most common meridians that are implicated in hormones and hormone imbalances is the liver meridian. And the liver meridian runs right through the breast. The emotion that's associated with the liver meridian is anger. So one of the things we've seen, and I've sat with so many amazing women, but one of the things that I've seen over and over again is that we will sit through a trauma together. And that trauma could be divorce, it could be the loss of a child, it could be whatever. But anger is historically the first emotion. And for many of those women, and I wish I had kept track over the years, but these are things that you just see as you keep moving. But for many of these women, they end up with a diagnosis of breast cancer, usually 18 months later. I can almost time it. And so what it has done to me in practice is when I now sit with a woman going through something like that, it is, we need an emotional plan, we need an energetic plan, we need your physical hormonal nutrient plan, and we need to understand the community around you, because we don't want that to happen 18 months from now, right? So that's just a very clear, like I could be almost linear about how the emotion of anger in women can be tied to breast cancer, But then there's also grief and worry and sadness and many of these other things. Grief lives in the lungs. That's where we start to see issues with asthma or trouble breathing or other diagnoses, right? We know that sadness and worry often live in the gut, I mean, I sometimes wonder, my second child, my son, I was starting the practices, working the ER, had another child. There was total chaos. My husband was doing the exact same on his version. But I was so stressed during that entire pregnancy, and I was overthinking and processing and doing all this stuff. Well, he was born with a very weak gut. In Chinese medicine, they talk about the emotion of the mother transferring to the child, and how, for a long time I had to wrestle with, did my excessive worry, excessive stress, excessive overthinking in turn impact not just my gut, but his gut as well. My gut was already hit, right, in med school and stuff like that. So Chinese medicine talks about this, but they don't talk about it with like, oh, you can't think and you can't be stressed and blah, blah, blah. It's not that. It's more like, understand that when these emotions show up, we need a plan, and here's what the plan should look like. It's not just about going to your counselor. It's also about, what are you doing from a gut perspective? Or if you've lost somebody, what are you doing from a lung perspective, And then who's the community around you? Like, all these things were really, really important. So I talk a lot, well, not as much as I would like to, but there's a chapter in the book on emotions. But I talk a lot about, and we do this in our boot camps and things like that, can you find where your emotional vibration is? Where do you live moment to moment, day to day? Because if you can identify it, then your job, there's a scale of emotions, as I'm sure you've seen before, like what the lowest emotion is, which is like hate and, anger and all this other stuff. And the highest is usually joy and love and stuff like that. And the middle is neutrality, where you're just kind of in the middle. So, and then there's all these emotions on either side of that neutral scale. And like, I always challenge both my patients and the people I'm working with, and even myself, like, where are you living today, vibrationally, emotionally? Can you just go one level up? You don't have to get all the way to joy and love and, toxic positivity and all that other stuff, but can you just move up a few levels? So if you're at worry, can you just move up to the next level, And so I think the more we become aware of that, it is motivating, A, to have a plan, and B, to look at your life, like what's going on, and women historically through history have always sacrificed. As emotional as we are, I think there's been an expectation to sacrifice your emotions for the greater good, whatever that greater good is, right? A family, a community, a job, whatever. And the question to ask is like, what is the emotional toll of whatever position you're putting yourself in, And is that really where you need to be? And then to also flip that question with, are you experiencing this emotional toll due to any factors that you can control on your own? So is this new? This is not about a toxic marriage or a troubled child. This is like, I'm a happy person. And all of a sudden somebody has pulled the rug out from under me and I feel like I'm going to blow up every 2 seconds, So is that a change? And then understanding this interplay, right? The sort of like connectivity between our emotions and our mental state and our physical state is really important. And our emotions are just another way of the body kind of talking to us and telling us, hey, to dig in, to understand what's going on, to pursue help, and then at the end of the day, to advocate for yourself and make sure you're getting what you need.
Yeah. It's making me think of a friend of mine who went through again, not something she could control. I'm sure she could self-reflect on how she's responding to it, but she got her whole entire identity stolen.
Yeah.
And it felt very violating and out of control. And so she was under severe stress for 2 years. And then she got, and she's older, she got diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis and now is on methotrexate. And and I'm just I see this clear correlation.
Yeah.
And want her to get that perspective of how everything is connected and shift it from a, more ancient wisdom, holistic perspective. But it's also connected. And I'm just so grateful that there's people like you that are helping people in the right way. And so everybody, the Hormone Shift, this is your guidebook, and it'll be a great launch pad for you to shift gracefully. I know that. I know it is for me. But where can people find you?
Well, I am all over social. So Dr. Taz MD, DRTAZMD. And then they can come to my website, which is drtaz.com, our practice website, which is CentreSpringMD.com as well.
Awesome. And then I'm going to see you.
Yes.
I don't know who I talked to.
Lindsay. Well, Gabby can help you with that for sure. So
awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Heal with Kelly podcast. Be sure to tune in every Thursday for more empowering wisdom and inspiring healing stories. And make sure you hit the follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss that one episode that holds the answer you've been searching for. Oh, and if you found this episode inspiring, please rate, review, and share Heal with Kelly so that we can grow our audience and reach more people. We truly appreciate it. Lots of love.